Hi, I'm Paul Sharpe at D'Addario, and I'm here to talk about standing or sitting with the double bass. A lot of people wonder, should my child learn to stand or should he learn to sit? Or even the student. My teacher tells me to stand, but I really want to sit. So it's kind of an important issue, and the debate always goes round and round. I will tell you that from my own perspective, I spend most of my time sitting as a double bassist. However, until the age of about 25, I was a stander. And in my heart, I'd love to be standing. However, I fell in love with the double bass, my current instrument, and it has very large shoulders. What this gets into is that sometimes the double bass dictates things to you that are more comfortable than you would necessarily prefer. And you have to adapt your technique to suit the instrument. Each individual instrument is quite different at times. So the choice for sitting or standing can be a kind of personal one. With all of my students, though, I start them standing. And I start them standing for the simple reason that I think standing is probably a little bit harder than learning to sit. In fact, somebody who's learned to stand has no problem sitting. You can give them a stool and they'll sit on it, adjust the bass, and they don't have to worry about anything. They'll figure out how it's comfortable. But somebody who's learned only to sit and then has to learn how to stand, it's a much longer process. So I also like to get my students very comfortable with the idea of standing and the idea that they can manage the weight of the bass just fine. It takes a few weeks to learn how to manage the weight of the double bass and feel comfortable with it. But before long, after a week or two, pretty soon they're standing comfortably and have no worries in that area. So I teach standing first, but then in a good orchestra situation, it's time probably to sit. Or if you want to learn to sit comfortably, this is how to do it. The first very important issue with learning to sit is to choose an appropriately sized stool. If you go to the store and purchase any old bar stool, they're usually about 30 inches tall, sometimes give or take an inch. That stool height is a little bit high for most students, and it's frankly, I'm 6'3", a little bit high for me as well. Here's my stool. I can sit on it comfortably, and you see that both legs are bent and both legs are on the floor. I didn't sit this way until about 3 or 4 years ago, quite frankly. I used to sit up like this and keep my left leg on the stool, right leg down, which is a very popular way to stand, or rather, way to sit. However, I discovered that way I was throwing my back kind of out of alignment. After a while, you start to feel this little twist in your spine, and it's not so comfortable. So I always teach my students that if they go to the store and buy a 30-inch bar stool, make sure they've got a saw and can saw it to a size that's appropriate to them. The slight bend in the knees is perfect. Your behind has to be comfortable. Sitting on your stool, if it feels high and perched up, not a good sign. So get that stool low, put a nice cushion on it so you can sit there for a couple hours and not worry about it. And then pick up the double bass. One of the most important things about sitting is that that spine stays quite straight. The last thing I want to do is develop a bunch of bass players who have this significant bend and are kind of hovering over the instrument all the time. The spine remains straight, even when you're playing up high. You can see my arms all at the end of the fingerboard. My spine, I don't know if you can tell this, is quite straight. I lean back, still straight, as opposed to coming around the bass again like this. So, both feet flat on the floor. Where the bass goes in relationship to you is basically I keep the end pin midway between my feet. The bass can either sit comfortably like this, so kind of resting a little bit more on my left leg, or the way I've chosen to sit with my big shouldered instrument is to let the bass rest a little bit more on my right thigh, and I come around and play it like that. Along with these little different elements here, this is a lot easier to play on the G string with it positioned on the left leg. And, you know, if your right arm is comfortable, it means you're doing something right. As you move to the E string, you might have to tilt the bass out just a little bit to allow good access to the instrument and get a big fat sound on the E string. Then bring it back for the G string. With the other method, I let it rest somewhat on my right thigh. My left leg catches it just a little bit in the back. And I have no repositioning of the double bass. Right? And that is sitting with the double bass.